Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Brother and sister, welcome back to Islamic Notes channel. The development of Islam in Europe began in the 8th century, when Muslims from North Africa conquered the Iberian Peninsula and established Islamic civilization in the region known as Al-Andalus, Spain and Portugal. In the Balkan region, Islam spread through the rule of the Ottoman Empire in the 14th to 17th centuries. Over time, Muslim communities also developed in Western European countries through colonial relations, such as in France, the Netherlands, and England, as well as through labor migration in the 20th century from Muslim-majority countries such as Turkey, Morocco, and Pakistan. Today, Islam is the second largest religion in many European countries, despite facing challenges in integration, stereotypes, and Islamophobia. Even so, Muslims in Europe continue to contribute in the social, economic, and cultural fields, and are an important part of the diversity of modern European society. Now, the development of Islam in Europe is very rapid. There are 42.7 million Muslims recorded. This is reported from the International Journal of Environmental Science and Development by Hind Katani. Here are the top 10 countries with the largest Muslim populations in Europe today. 1. Russia. Islam has become the second largest religion in Russia after Orthodox Christianity. The number of Muslims living in the Red Bear country is estimated to reach 25 to 30 million people out of a total population of 145 million. Of the 182 ethnic groups spread across Russia, 57 of them are Muslim. Islam in Russia is showing very encouraging signs. The Muslim population is starting to play an important role in various fields because religious organizations in Russia are quite active, and there are more than 7,000 mosques. Islam first entered Russia at the beginning of the Hijriya. The development of Dawah was pioneered by Commander Ahmad bin Fadlan, an envoy from the Abbasid Dawla. Until now, Islam continues to grow in the country, led by President Vladimir Putin. The development of Islam in Russia, from historical traces to contemporary challenges. Islam in Russia is not a new religion or the result of modern expansion. Traces of Islam have been present in the region that is now part of the Russian Federation for more than 1,000 years. Although often invisible in global discourse on the Muslim world, Russia is home to one of the largest Muslim populations in Europe, estimated at between 20 and 25 million, about 15 to 18% of the country's total population. The development of Islam in Russia reflects the tensions between historical heritage, state control, and religious dynamics in a multi-ethnic, multi-religious society. Historical roots. Islam enters Russia. Islam first entered what is now Russia via two main routes, from south to north through Dagestan in the Caucasus, and from east to west through the Volga Bulgarians. By the 10th century, Islam had become the official religion of Volga Bulgaria, a Turkic kingdom located around the Volga River near modern-day Kazan. The year 922 CE marked a pivotal moment when the Bulgar king Almush formally converted to Islam and invited Muslim missionaries from the Abbasid Caliphate. This event is often celebrated by Russian Muslims as the beginning of Islam's presence on Russian soil. In the Caucasus region, Islam spread slowly from the 7th and 8th centuries through trade contacts and missionary work, and later took root among mountain tribes such as the Chechens, Dagestanis, and Ingushichens. In southern Russia, Islam became an important part of the ethnic and social identity of the people. Islam under the Russian Empire. As the Russian Empire began to expand south and east in the 16th and 17th centuries, many Muslim communities such as the Tatars, Bashkirs, and various Caucasian ethnicities came under Tsarist rule. Although initially subject to repression, such as forced Christianization, the Russian government under Catherine the Great, 18th century, began to adopt a more pragmatic approach. Catherine established the Orenburg Muftiat, the first official Islamic institution in the Russian Empire, in 1788, to oversee the religious life of Muslims under state control. Throughout the 19th century, Muslims in Russia lived in a tension between cultural autonomy and assimilationist pressures. Many Muslim intellectuals such as Ismail Gasprinsky from Crimea began developing Jihadism, an Islamic reform movement that emphasized modern education, a unified Turkic language, and a progressive Muslim identity. This movement sought to meet the challenges of modernity and Russian imperialism with the spirit of Islamic renewal. The Soviet regime and religious repression. The Soviet era, 1917 to 1991, was one of the darkest periods for Muslims in Russia. The communist state officially adopted atheism and carried out widespread repression of all religions. Mosques were closed, madrasas were disbanded, and clerics were arrested or executed. At its peak, only a handful of mosques were allowed to operate officially throughout the Soviet Union. Many Muslim communities had to practice their religion in secret. However, even amid the repression, Islam never completely died out. In some regions such as Dagestan and Chechnya, Islamic traditions survived through oral transmission, Sufi orders, and underground communities. After World War II, the Soviet government tried to normalize relations with the Islamic world, primarily to improve its international image, and some mosques and official Islamic institutions were again allowed to operate on a limited basis. Post-Soviet revival, re-Islamization, and new dynamics. The collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991 opened a new chapter in the history of Islam in Russia. Relatively greater religious freedom enabled a religious revival in many Muslim regions. Thousands of mosques were rebuilt or renovated, madrasas were established, and young Muslims began studying abroad, in Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Pakistan, to deepen their religious knowledge. Kazan, the capital of the Republic of Tatarstan, and Makhachkala in Dagestan became centers of the Islamic revival. Local governments in several Muslim-majority republics began to promote Islamic identity as part of their ethnicity. On the other hand, this also raised concerns in Moscow about the potential for separatism and Islamic radicalism. The Russian government, especially under Vladimir Putin, has developed a two-pronged approach, supporting traditional Islam, led by official muftis who are loyal to the state, and cracking down on Islamist groups deemed extremist or with transnational connections. This creates tensions between official Islam and independent groups growing on the fringes, including Salafis, Hizb ut-Tahrir, and others. Islam in big cities in the new diaspora. In addition to Muslim-majority regions such as Tatarstan, Bashkortostan, and the North Caucasus, Islam is also growing rapidly in big cities such as Moscow and St. Petersburg. Muslim immigrants from Central Asia, especially Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and Kyrgyzstan, have arrived in large numbers as migrant workers. They have formed active urban Muslim communities, although they often face discrimination and stereotypes. Moscow's Cathedral Mosque, renovated and reopened in 2015, is an important symbol of Islam's presence in the heart of the Russian capital. However, the presence of Muslim communities in big cities still faces challenges, including access to places of worship, legal treatment, and social integration. Challenges and future prospects. Islam in Russia today finds itself in a complex position. On the one hand, it is recognized as part of the four traditional religions of Russia, alongside Orthodoxy, Judaism, and Buddhism. The state supports a structured and loyal Islam. On the other hand, religious freedom remains restricted, and accusations of extremism can be widely used to suppress political opponents or religious groups deemed inconsistent with the state's agenda. One of the biggest challenges is building strong, independent Islamic institutions that are rooted in the Russian context. In addition, there is a need to bridge the gap between ethnic Islam, such as Tatars and Chechens, and the more multinational and young urban Islam. Amid global pressures on Islam, the rise of Muslim identity in Russia reflects a deep spiritual, social, and cultural need. If managed wisely and fairly, Islam in Russia can play a positive role in shaping the future of the world's largest multicultural country. Deuxième France. The rise of Islam in France is currently recorded with a total Muslim population of 6.7 million people. This figure is equivalent to 10% of the total population of 60 million. The expansion of Islamic preaching began to enter France since the reign of the Umayyad dynasty in the 8th century, led by Commander Abdurrahman al-Ghafiqi through the Pyrenees Mountains. However, the challenge of being a Muslim there is often underestimated, namely Islamophobia. This challenge cannot be separated from internal conflict and the influence of bias against Islam among the population. Among the reasons for the presence of Islamophobia in France is Islam being accused of being the cause of the economic recession, as well as the stigma of terrorism after the dark events in the United States on September 11, 2001. The development of Islam in France, between identity, secularism, and social challenges. Islam in France is a very important social, historical, and political reality in the country's contemporary landscape. With an estimated number of adherents reaching more than 5 million people, around 8% of the total population, Islam is the second largest religion after Catholicism in France. However, the presence of Islam in a country with a strong tradition of secularism, laïcité, was not without tensions. The journey of Islam in France reflects the complex relationship between religion, identity, colonialism, and modern state policy. Historical roots, colonialism, and early contact with the Islamic world. The relationship between France and the Islamic world began in the Middle Ages, but became more intense during the era of modern colonialism. In the 19th century, France began to colonize Muslim territories in North Africa, such as Algeria, 1830, Tunisia, 1881, and Morocco, 1912. This process of colonization was not only a territorial expansion, but also became the starting point for social and cultural contact between Muslim communities and the French state. Algeria has a special place in this history. Unlike other colonies, Algeria was considered part of the French national territory. However, despite this, the Muslim population did not receive full citizenship status unless they renounced Islamic law, Sharia. This created deep identity tensions that continued until Algeria's independence in 1962. Migration and the growth of Muslim communities. After World War II, France experienced a labor shortage. To support post-war development, the country opened its doors to migrants from its former colonies, especially Algeria, Morocco, and Tunisia. Many of them were Muslims. They came as industrial workers and settled in the suburbs of major cities such as Paris, Marseille, Lyon, and Lille. Initially considered a temporary migration, many of these immigrants eventually settled permanently, bringing their families with them. This gave rise to the second and third generations of French Muslims who grew up and were educated in the French secular system, but retained their Islamic cultural and religious roots. Islam and the secular state, a perpetual tension. France has been officially a secular state since 1905, when the law of separation of church and state, laïcité, was enacted. This principle means that the state does not support or discriminate against any religion. In practice, however, laïcité often means a rejection of religious expression in the public sphere. Tensions began to rise as the Muslim community began demanding rights such as the construction of mosques, the wearing of headscarves in public schools, the provision of halal food in canteens, and prayer times. One major flashpoint occurred in 1989, when 3 Muslim schoolgirls were expelled from a public school for refusing to remove their headscarves. The incident sparked a national debate about the boundaries between religious freedom and secularism. Finally, in 2004, the French government banned the wearing of prominent religious symbols, including headscarves, in public schools. The move was seen by many in the Muslim community as a form of veiled discrimination against Islam, even though it officially applies to all religions. Islam amidst the issue of radicalization and terrorism. Since the 2000s, the issue of Islam in France has also been increasingly associated with the problem of radicalization and terrorism. Attacks such as the massacre at the Charlie Hebdo magazine office, 2015, the attack at the Bataclan, 2015, and other incidents have raised negative sentiments towards the Muslim community. Although most French Muslims reject violence and extremism, the public image of Islam is often affected by the actions of a few people. The government responded with policies such as monitoring mosques, disbanding certain Muslim organizations, and the French Islam Project, an effort to shape Islam that is considered in line with the values of the French Republic. However, many observers note that a security approach alone is not enough. Economic inequality, structural discrimination, and social marginalization in the suburbs, banlieues, have also become fertile ground for feelings of frustration and alienation, especially among young Muslims. Dual identities and the struggle of a new generation. The younger generation of Muslims in France face complex identity challenges. They are French citizens who were born and raised in the country, but often feel foreign because of their name, skin color, or faith. Often they feel forced to choose between being Muslim or French, as if the two cannot coexist. On the other hand, many of them act as bridges between the two worlds. They establish community organizations, become human rights activists, and perform in the arts, music, academia, and even politics. Figures like Tariq Ramadan, Rokhaya Diallo, and Marwan Mohammed have become important voices in the public debate about Islam in France. Yet stigma and stereotypes remain major obstacles. For example, unemployment rates among young Muslims are much higher than among other groups, and discrimination in employment or housing is very real. In many cases, being Muslim in France means having to fight harder to be accepted as a full citizen. Mosques, education, and religious infrastructure. The number of mosques and Muslim places of worship in France has increased rapidly in recent decades. From just a few hundred in the 1980s, there are now more than 2,500 across the country. However, many of these mosques are small and underfunded. Moreover, because laïcité prohibits public funding for places of worship, Muslim communities must rely on internal donations or foreign funding, further raising concerns about foreign influence. Islamic education is also growing through private madrasas and Islamic schools, although their number remains small. The creation of a French Muslim Council, Conseil Français du Culte Musulman, is also part of the government's strategy to institutionalize Islam, although it has been criticized as being too representative and state-controlled. The future of Islam in France. The future of Islam in France depends largely on the ability of the state and its society to reconcile the principles of secularism with respect for diversity. Key challenges are overcoming stereotypes, combating discrimination, and creating spaces for inclusive religious expression. While the state continues to push for a French Islam model that is integrated into the values of the Republic, Muslim communities are also forming their own identity as law-abiding French citizens who are also proud of their faith. In an increasingly connected and pluralistic world, the question is no longer whether Islam fits into France, but how France, as a democratic country, can embrace Islam as an integral part of its society. The journey is not over, but the potential for harmony and cohesion remains open if there is political will, fair policies, and a space for sincere dialogue. 3. Germany. Islam in Germany has existed since the Middle Ages. It is recorded that there are 4.4 to 5 million Muslims in Germany, or equivalent to 5.7% of the total population. This makes Germany the third country, after Russia and France, with the largest number of Muslims in Europe. The entry of Islam into Germany began during the time of Caliph Harun al-Rashid in the 9th century. Caliph Harun was known as the bearer of the glory of the Abbasid dynasty in the fields of science and civilization. In addition, during the era of Sultan Mustafa, the first of the Ottoman Empire, an important role was also given to the development of Islam there. The development of Islam in Germany. Islam is the second largest religion in Germany after Christianity. Although the presence of Islam in Germany has only become significant in recent decades, the history of relations between the Islamic world and the German region can be traced back to the Middle Ages through trade, diplomacy, and scientific exchange. However, the development of Islam as part of German society in real terms only occurred after World War II. In 1961, West Germany signed a labor agreement with Turkey. Since then, hundreds of thousands of guest workers, known as Gastarbeiter, have come to Germany to work in the industrial sector. Initially intended to stay only temporarily, many have settled permanently, forming the first significant Muslim community in the country. Over time, their families have joined them, and the need for places of worship and religious education has increased. Today, it is estimated that there are between 5 and 5.5 million Muslims in Germany, or about 6% of the total population. The majority of them are of Turkish descent, But the Muslim community in Germany also includes people of Arab, Bosnian, Pakistani, Afghan descent, as well as immigrants and refugees from Syria and other Middle Eastern countries. The development of Islam in Germany can be seen in the increasing number of mosques and Islamic centers. From small spaces in factories or private homes, there are now thousands of mosques throughout the country, including large mosques such as the Cologne Central Mosque, which has become a symbol of openness and integration. In addition, Islamic organizations such as DİTİB, Turkish Islamic Union, Der Anstalt für Religion, Milli Görüş, and Islamrat play an important role in fostering the religious life of Muslims in Germany. They not only manage mosques, but also provide religious education, organize social activities, and become dialogue partners with the government and other communities. The German government has also begun to recognize the importance of Islam in society. In recent years, several state universities have opened Islamic study programs and Islamic religious teacher training for public schools. This aims to provide professional Islamic religious education that is in line with German democratic values and law. However, the journey of Muslims in Germany has not always been smooth. The challenges of integration, discrimination, and Islamophobia remain serious problems. Incidents of hatred towards Muslims and negative stereotypes in the media and politics sometimes hinder the process of healthy integration. Nevertheless, more and more German Muslims, especially the younger generation, are actively participating in the country's social, economic, and political life, even serving in parliament and government institutions. Overall, the development of Islam in Germany reflects the dynamics between religious identity and social integration in an increasingly pluralistic society. With the support of interfaith dialogue and inclusive policies, Islam in Germany is not only part of the history of migration, but also of the country's more open and multicultural future. 4. England. The development of Islam in England can be said to be very rapid in the last 2 decades. The number of British citizens who converted to Islam has almost doubled. It is recorded that around 5,000 people embrace Islam each year. This is an extraordinary development in a country that was previously dominated by Christianity and atheistic values. In the 16th century, Islam began to enter England through immigrants from Yemen, Gujarat, and the Middle East. When the Suez Canal was opened in 1869, many Muslims came and formed new settlements in port cities such as London, Liverpool, and Newcastle. These settlements built mosques, established centers for preaching and education, and were active in universities. Many students from Indonesia, Malaysia, Libya, Iran, Turkey, Saudi, Palestine, and other countries have taken part in Islamic preaching there. The development of Islam in England. The development of Islam in England is a long journey involving social, political, and cultural dynamics. Although Islam is not the native religion of England, its presence has been deeply embedded in society since the 19th century and continues to show significant development until now. The beginning of the arrival of Islam in England. The traces of Islam in England can be traced back to the 18th and 19th centuries, when trade relations between England and Muslim-majority regions such as India, the Middle East, and North Africa began to be established. Sailors, traders, and students from British territories in South Asia came to England bringing with them Islamic traditions and teachings. The Muslim community first developed in port cities such as Liverpool and Cardiff. In Liverpool, the first mosque in England, the Liverpool Muslim Institute, was founded by William Abdullah Quilliam in 1887. Quilliam was a convert who was very influential in introducing Islam to British society. Growth of the Muslim community. After World War II, there was a massive surge in migration from former British colonies, especially from Pakistan, Bangladesh, and India. These migrants came to fill the workforce gap in the industrial and public service sectors. With their arrival, the Muslim population in Britain began to grow rapidly. They formed organized communities, built mosques, Islamic schools, and social institutions. By the 2020s, the number of Muslims in Britain had reached more than 3 million people, which means around 5 to 6% of the total population. The largest concentration of Muslims is in big cities such as London, Birmingham, Manchester, and Bradford. This community is very diverse, consisting of various ethnicities such as Pakistani, Bangladeshi, Arab, Turkish and African, as well as local converts from the white British community. Contributions and challenges. The Muslim community in Britain has made significant contributions in various fields, including economics, education, politics, and culture. Many British Muslims have succeeded in becoming prominent figures, both as members of parliament, businessmen, academics, and artists. Their presence enriches the diversity of British culture and strengthens the values of tolerance between religious communities. However, the journey of the Muslim community has not always been easy. They face challenges such as discrimination, negative stereotypes, and Islamophobia, especially after September 11th and the London terror attacks on July 7th, 2005. The media often highlights extremism as a representation of Islam, which worsens the image of Muslims as a whole. However, many Muslim figures and organizations are active in building interfaith dialogue and promoting Islam as a religion of peace and tolerance. Islam and the young generation. The second and third generation of British Muslims are now playing a significant role in shaping a modern and contextual Muslim identity with British culture. They are active in social media, the arts and education, and strive to bridge Islamic values with contemporary Western life. Many of them were born and raised in the UK, so their Islamic identity is often combined with their identity as British citizens. The development of Islam in the UK is clear evidence that this religion is able to adapt and contribute to a multicultural society. Despite facing various challenges, the Muslim community continues to grow and strives to show a positive, inclusive, and dynamic face of Islam. With open dialogue, education, and interfaith collaboration, the future of Islam in the UK looks increasingly bright and promising. Sinci, Albania. Albania is the only country in Europe with a Muslim majority. Islam was introduced during the Ottoman period. The majority of Albanians gradually converted to Islam. However, in the 20th century, there was suppression of Islam, starting from the Albanian National Awakening, Rilinja, the monarchy, to the communist government that systematically eliminated religion from the Albanian nation and culture from 1945 to 1990. After that, Alhamdulillah, Islam regained its footing. Currently, there are around 500 mosques, and more than 70% of the Albanian population is Muslim. The development of Islam in Albania. Islam in Albania has a unique and complex history, influenced by political upheaval, colonization, and social dynamics that have shaped the religious identity of its people to this day. Although Albania is a European country, Islam is the majority religion there, a fact that has its roots since the Ottoman Empire and has continued to develop through various challenging historical phases. The beginning of Islam in Albania. Islam began to enter the Albanian region significantly in the 15th century when the region was conquered by the Ottoman Empire. Before that, the majority of the Albanian population was Orthodox or Catholic. Ottoman rule brought about major changes in the social, political, and religious order of the Albanian people. The Ottoman government encouraged conversion to Islam through economic, social, and administrative incentives. Those who converted to Islam received benefits in terms of taxes, government positions, and legal protection. Over time, many Albanians, especially from the nobility and landowners, decided to convert to Islam, and eventually Islam became the dominant religion in the region. By the 17th century, the majority of the Albanian population was Muslim, both Sunni and Bektashi, a Sufi order that had an important place in Albania. The role of Islam in culture and politics. During the Ottoman period, Albanian Muslims played an important role in the government, military, and culture of the Ottoman Empire. Many Albanians became high-ranking officials, including Grand Vizier, Prime Minister of the Empire. Islam also shaped Albanian cultural identity through the construction of mosques, Islamic schools, madrasas, and religious literature in Arabic, Persian, and Turkish. However, despite being a Muslim majority, Albania also maintained a spirit of tolerance and religious diversity. Relations between religious communities were generally peaceful and respectful, a characteristic that persists to this day. Communism and religious persecution. The darkest period for the development of Islam and all other religions in Albania occurred during the communist regime of Enver Hoxha, 1944 to 1985. Albania became the world's first officially atheist state in 1967, when all forms of religious practice were strictly prohibited. Mosques, churches, and other places of worship were closed or destroyed. Religious leaders were arrested, imprisoned, or killed. Religious education was banned and all religious symbols were removed from public spaces. For more than 2 decades, Albania's young generation grew up without access to any religious knowledge. This had a profound impact on the society, leading to a drastic decline in religious understanding and practice. The revival of Islam post-communism. After the fall of communism in the early 1990s, religious freedom was restored in Albania. Albanians were again free to practice their religion, including Islam. Religious organizations, mosques, and Islamic educational institutions were re-established. Aid and preaching also came from Muslim countries such as Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt, which helped revitalize Islamic knowledge and practice in Albania. However, the revival of Islam in Albania took place in the context of a society that had become highly secular. Many Albanian Muslims practice their religion with a moderate approach that is more cultural than theological. For example, many people identify as Muslim, but do not always strictly observe religious obligations. Islam in contemporary Albania. Today, Islam remains the largest religion in Albania, with about 60% of the population identifying as Muslim, although religious practices vary widely. Sunni Islam is the majority branch, while the Bektashi, who are distinctly Albanian, remain an important group, making the country the center of the Bektashi world. The Albanian government has officially adopted the principle of secularism, and the relationship between religion and state is strictly guarded. Religious education is available on a limited and voluntary basis. Modern mosques have been built, including the large mosque in Tirana, funded by Turkey, as a symbol of friendship in the new development of Islam. In the midst of globalization and modernization, Albanian Muslims are faced with the challenge of balancing their Islamic identity with European national values and modernity. However, tolerance and moderation remain hallmarks of Islam's development in the country. The journey of Islam in Albania reflects the remarkable adaptability and resilience of a religion that has survived conquest, extreme restrictions, and revival. Today, Islam in Albania appears as an integral part of national and cultural identity, albeit in a unique form and deeply rooted in the values of tolerance and moderation. The future of Islam in Albania seems set to continue to develop, along with openness to religious freedom and the active role of the Muslim community in social and political life. 6th, Kosovo. Islam is the majority religion in Kosovo. As many as 2.3 million people, or around 93.5% of the total population of 2.4 million, are Muslims. The majority of Muslims in Kosovo come from ethnic Albanians, Bosnians, Gorani, and Turks. The development of Islam in Kosovo. Islam in Kosovo has a long and rich history, starting in the 14th century and continuing to grow to this day. Although Kosovo is a small country in southeastern Europe, the presence of Islam in this region shows how religion can blend with the cultural and historical identity of a nation. The beginning of the entry of Islam. Islam first entered the Kosovo region after the Ottoman Empire began to conquer the Balkan region in the late 14th century. One important moment was the Battle of Kosovo in 1389, where Ottoman troops faced Christian Serbian troops. Although the outcome of the battle did not result in an immediate victory for the Ottomans, it marked the beginning of Ottoman political and cultural influence in the region. After the territory of Kosovo officially became part of the Ottoman Empire in the early 15th century, the process of Islamization began gradually. The local population, especially the political and economic elite, began to convert to Islam for various reasons, including access to government positions, economic security, and cultural proximity to the new rulers. Ottoman period. During the more than 500 years of Ottoman rule, Islam became the dominant religion in Kosovo. Mosques began to be built in various cities, including large ones such as the Sultan Mehmed Fatih Mosque in the capital Pristina and the Sinan Pasha Mosque in Prizren. Islamic educational institutions, such as madrasas, also developed, and Sharia law was enforced for Muslims. During this period, the Muslim community in Kosovo consisted of various ethnicities, including Albanians, Turks, and Gorani. Islam became an integral part of the social, cultural, and political life of the Kosovan people. Colonization and communism. The presence of Islam began to be seriously challenged in the 20th century. After the fall of the Ottoman Empire, Kosovo became part of the Kingdom of Serbia and later Yugoslavia. During this period, there was a decline in the influence of Islam, especially during the communist regime under Josip Broz Tito. The communist government implemented a strict secular policy. Religious institutions were tightly controlled, religious education was restricted, and many mosques were closed or converted. However, Islam remained an important identity, especially for the Muslim Albanian ethnic group that made up the majority of Kosovo's population. The Kosovo War and the revival of Islam. The Kosovo War in the late 1990s, which caused ethnic conflict and NATO intervention, left deep scars on the community. However, after the war and Kosovo's declaration of independence in 2008, Islam began to experience a revival in society. Many mosques that were destroyed during the war were repaired, and Islamic institutions such as Bashkësia Islame e Kosovës, Islamic Community of Kosovo, became active again in social and religious life. Religious education was reintroduced to schools on a limited basis, and Islamic universities were established. Contemporary Islam in Kosovo. Today, around 90 to 95% of Kosovo's population is Muslim, mainly ethnic Albanians. Islam is mostly practiced according to the Sunni Hanafi school, a legacy of the Ottoman era. In recent decades, outside influences, such as from the Middle East, have also begun to enter through humanitarian aid and education, which sometimes raises concerns about radicalization. However, in general, Islam in Kosovo is moderate and tolerant. The Kosovo government adopts a secular system, but guarantees freedom of religion in its constitution. Islam plays an important role in the spiritual and cultural life of the community, but religious practices vary widely, from the very devout to the secular. Islam in Kosovo is not just a religion, but part of the nation's historical and cultural identity. Despite severe challenges during periods of conflict and communist regimes, Islam has survived and even experienced a revival in the modern era. With a moderate and tolerant approach, the Muslim community of Kosovo shows how Islam can adapt in the context of a secular and multicultural state. 7. Bosnia and Herzegovina. Bosnia and Herzegovina has 1.9 million Muslims, or around 43.8% of the total 4.2 million people. Turkish civilization through the Ottoman Empire in the 15th century is believed to have greatly influenced the development of Islam in this region. The development of Islam in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Islam has a long and deep history in Bosnia and Herzegovina, a country in the Balkan region located in southeastern Europe. The presence of Islam in this region began in the 15th century, when the Ottoman Empire expanded its territory to Europe. The process of Islamization in Bosnia occurred gradually and involved various aspects of the social, political, and cultural life of the local community. The beginning of Islam. Islam began to enter Bosnia in 1463, when the region officially became part of the Ottoman Empire. Unlike many other regions that were brutally conquered, the Ottomans implemented a relatively inclusive approach in Bosnia. The local population was granted religious freedom, but with a special tax, jizya, for non-Muslims. Under these conditions, many Bosnians, especially local nobles and officials, converted to Islam as part of their adaptation to the new power structure. Over the decades, Islamization proceeded peacefully and slowly through cultural influences, trade, and political integration. Bosnian Muslim society. The conversion of the Bosnian population to Islam resulted in the formation of a unique Muslim community, the Bosniaks. They became Sunni Muslims of the Hanafi school, following the religious tradition dominant in the Ottoman Empire. The Bosniaks retained their South Slavic language, but incorporated many elements of Islamic and Turkish culture into their daily lives, including in architecture, cuisine, and customary law. Islam flourished in Bosnia during the Ottoman period. Mosques, madrasas, libraries, and other religious institutions were built throughout the region. The city of Sarajevo, the modern capital of Bosnia and Herzegovina, grew into an important center of Islamic education and culture in the Balkan region. The Gazi Husrev Beg Mosque in Sarajevo, built in 1531, is an important symbol of Bosnia's Islamic heritage, decline and challenges. Ottoman power in the Balkans began to decline in the 19th century. After the Ottoman defeat in several wars, Bosnia was annexed by the Austro-Hungarian Empire in 1878. Under this new government, Muslims in Bosnia faced significant challenges, including pressure to assimilate and the loss of privileges they had enjoyed under the Ottomans. Nevertheless, many Islamic institutions survived, and the Bosnian Muslim identity remained strong. After World War I, Bosnia became part of the Kingdom of Yugoslavia and later the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia under the communist rule of Tito. During this time, religious freedom was severely restricted. Mosques were closed or converted, religious education was banned, and many religious leaders were repressed. However, the Bosnian Muslim community survived, despite severe pressure. Bosnian revival and war. In the late 20th century, after the collapse of Yugoslavia, Bosnia and Herzegovina declared its independence in 1992. However, shortly afterward, the country plunged into a brutal civil war known as the Bosnian War, 1992 to 1995. During this conflict, Bosnian Muslims were the main victims of ethnic cleansing and atrocities, including the genocide in Srebrenica in 1995. The war was a major turning point in the history of Islam in Bosnia. In addition to the great suffering experienced by Muslims, the international community began to pay attention to their situation. After the war ended through the Dayton Agreement, Islam in Bosnia experienced a revival. Destroyed mosques were rebuilt, and religious activities were revived. Islamic organizations also began to play an important role in the process of reconstruction and national reconciliation. Islam in modern Bosnia. Today, about 50% of the population of Bosnia and Herzegovina is Muslim, making Islam the majority religion. Islam in Bosnia is characterized by moderation, with a tradition of Sufism and openness to cultural pluralism. The Islamic Religious Council of Bosnia and Herzegovina, Riyaset, is the highest body that regulates Muslim religious affairs in the country. Religious education has been reintroduced in schools, and various Islamic educational institutions, including Islamic universities, have been established. Despite challenges such as the growing influence of radical ideologies from outside and socioeconomic problems, Muslims in Bosnia continue to play an important role in the country's political and cultural life. The Bosnian model of Islam is often seen as an example of a tolerant Islam that is deeply rooted in local history and culture. The development of Islam in Bosnia and Herzegovina is a complex story that reflects the interplay of religion, politics, and culture. From the glory days of the Ottoman Empire to the tragedies of civil war, Bosnian Muslims have shown remarkable resilience in maintaining their identity and traditions. Today, Islam remains an integral part of Bosnian identity, and its role in shaping the future of the country cannot be overstated. 8. Italy. Italy recorded around 1.3 million Muslims in 2020, or around 2.1% of the total population of 63 million. The history of Islam in Italy began in the 9th century through expansion from North African countries. The development of Islam in Italy, history, challenges, and the future. Islam is one of the religions that has experienced significant development in Italy in recent decades. Although Italy is known as a Catholic country with a strong Christian history, the presence of Islam in this country has shown interesting dynamics, both in terms of history, demographics, social, and politics. Early history of Islam in Italy. The earliest traces of Islam in the Italian region can be traced back to the 9th century AD, when Muslim troops from North Africa conquered parts of Sicily. For more than 2 centuries, Sicily was under Muslim rule and developed into an advanced center of culture and science. The influence of Islam in art, architecture, agriculture, and science can still be seen in parts of the island to this day. However, Muslim rule in Italy ended after the Reconquista and the Norman Reconquest. For centuries afterward, Islam had little direct influence on the Italian peninsula until it re-emerged through modern migration, growth of modern Muslim communities. A significant growth of Islam in Italy occurred in the 20th century, especially after World War II, with an increase in migration from Muslim-majority countries such as Morocco, Tunisia, Egypt, Albania, Pakistan, Senegal, and Bangladesh. This migration was driven by economic and political factors, as well as Italy's need for foreign labor during a time of economic development. Today, there are an estimated 2.5 million Muslims in Italy, making it the second largest religious community after Catholics. However, only a small percentage of them have Italian citizenship due to strict citizenship policies. Most Muslims in Italy live in industrial regions such as Lombardy, Emilia-Romagna, and Lazio. Challenges facing the Muslim community. Despite its large population, the Muslim community in Italy faces several challenges. One of these is the limited number of official places of worship. Italy has hundreds of prayer rooms, but only a handful of officially recognized mosques. This has often been a source of tension between Muslim communities and local authorities, especially over permits for new mosques. In addition, Islamophobia and discrimination are also prominent issues. In Italian politics, there are right-wing groups that openly oppose immigration and voice anti-Muslim rhetoric. Such sentiments are often exacerbated by media coverage that associates Islam with extremism, even though the majority of Muslims in Italy are law-abiding citizens and contribute positively to society. Efforts at integration and interfaith dialogue. Despite the challenges, there are efforts to strengthen integration and interfaith dialogue. Several Muslim organizations work with local and national governments to improve cultural and religious understanding. Forums such as the Unione delle Comunità Islamiche d'Italia, Unione, and COREIS, Comunità Religiosa Islamica Italiana, play an important role in bridging communication between Muslim communities in the state. In addition, there are initiatives from Catholics and other Christians to build bridges of interfaith dialogue, considering the importance of peaceful coexistence in a modern multicultural society. The future of Islam in Italy. Islam in Italy is likely to continue to grow, both in terms of numbers and social contribution. The second and third generations of Italian Muslims are showing an increase in education and public participation. Many of them are entering politics, media, education, and business, becoming the new face of a more integrated and modern Muslim community. However, this future depends largely on state policies and the ability of Italian society as a whole to accept cultural and religious diversity. The successful integration of the Muslim community will be one of the main indicators of the maturity of Italian democracy in the face of globalization and religious pluralism. 9. Spain. Talking about Islam in Spain is certainly very interesting. Islam first entered Europe through the Iberian Peninsula, then spread to Andalusia, or what is now known as Spain. The entry of Islam there is estimated to have occurred in 711 AD, under the leadership of Caliph al-Walid bin Abdul Malik. The golden age of Islam in Spain occurred when Abdurrahman, a descendant of the Umayyads, founded the Umayyad dynasty in Andalusia in 755 AD. Under his leadership, Islam developed rapidly, from the construction of the Cordova Mosque, the enforcement of Islamic law, the advancement of science, to the establishment of Cordova University with a library of hundreds of thousands of books. Although Islam finally collapsed and was expelled by the Moriscos in the 17th century, Islamic relics in Spain can still be found today. The development of Islam in Spain. The development of Islam in Spain, known in history as Al-Andalus, is an important chapter in the history of Islam in Europe. Islam entered the Iberian Peninsula in 711 AD through a military expedition led by the Berber Muslim general Tariq bin Ziyad, under the rule of the Umayyad Caliphate. This expedition succeeded in defeating King Roderick of the Visigoth Kingdom, who at that time controlled the territory of Spain. In a relatively short time, the territory of Islam extended to most of the Iberian Peninsula. In the early days of the conquest, Islamic rule in Spain was under the rule of the Umayyad Caliphate centered in Damascus. However, after the fall of the Caliphate in 750 AD, The remaining Umayyad rulers fled to Al-Andalus. Abd al-Rahman one of the surviving members of the Umayyad family, succeeded in establishing the Emirate of Córdoba in 756 AD, which later developed into the Caliphate of Córdoba in 929 AD under the leadership of Abd al-Rahman III. During the Caliphate of Córdoba, Al-Andalus reached its peak. The city of Córdoba became a highly developed center of science, culture, art, and trade, rivaling the great cities of the Islamic world in Europe. Under Muslim rule, Spain became a meeting place for three great civilizations: Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. Muslim scholars such as Averroes, Ibn Rushd, al-Zahrawi, and Ibn Hazm played an important role in the development of science, medicine, and philosophy, which later influenced Europe through the Renaissance movement. However, this glory did not last forever. After the golden age of the Caliphate of Córdoba, the region of Al-Andalus was divided into several small kingdoms known as taifas. This division weakened Muslim power, which was then used by Christian kingdoms in northern Iberia, such as Castile, Aragon, and Leon, to carry out the Reconquista, a movement to reconquer the region by Christians. Although Muslim dynasties such as the Murabitun and Muwahhidun had come from North Africa to strengthen Muslim defenses, Islamic power in Spain continued to decline. Muslim territories were increasingly pushed south until only the Sultanate of Granada remained. This sultanate lasted for more than 2 centuries before finally being conquered by the forces of Ferdinand and Isabella of Castile and Aragon in 1492 AD, which marked the end of Islamic rule in Spain. After the fall of Granada, Muslims, known as Moriscos, experienced discrimination, forced conversion, and expulsion. Nevertheless, the legacy of Islam lives on in Spanish architecture, science, agriculture, and culture. Buildings such as the Alhambra in Granada and the Mezquita in Córdoba still bear silent witness to the past glory of Islam in the Iberian Peninsula. 10th, Netherlands. Lastly, the Netherlands. There are approximately 1.2 million Muslims, or 5.8% of the total population. Islam in the Netherlands has a unique history due to the important role of Indonesian Muslims. Islam first entered through migration in the mid-20th century, when small groups from Indonesia arrived and began to spread Islam. Today, the Muslim community in the Netherlands continues to grow and contribute to the cultural and social diversity there. The development of Islam in the Netherlands. The development of Islam in the Netherlands is a unique story in the history of Western Europe. Unlike countries such as Spain or the Balkans that were once under Islamic rule, the Netherlands was never conquered by Muslim powers. However, Islam continued to grow and develop in this country through colonial relations, migration, and modern globalization. The beginning of Islam in the Netherlands. The early traces of Islam in the Netherlands can be traced back to the 17th and 18th centuries, when the Netherlands became a major colonial power through the Verenigde Oost-Indische Compagnie, VOC, and established colonies in the archipelago, now Indonesia. During that time, many sailors, workers, and soldiers from Indonesia, the majority of whom were Muslim, visited or were brought to the Netherlands. They were the first Muslims in the country, although their numbers were very small, and their role in Dutch society was almost invisible socially and politically. Islam in the colonial and post-colonial eras. The Muslim presence in the Netherlands began to increase significantly in the 20th century, especially after World War II. After Indonesia's independence in 1945, some Indonesians of Ambonese and Javanese descent, including Muslim groups, moved to the Netherlands. However, the major surge in the Muslim community occurred in the 1960s and 1970s, when the Netherlands began to welcome migrant workers, gastarbeiters, from countries such as Turkey and Morocco to help rebuild the post-war economy. These migrant workers initially intended to stay temporarily, but many eventually settled permanently. They brought their families with them and formed a thriving Muslim community. Since then, the number of Muslims in the Netherlands has continued to increase, both through migration and births. Growth of the Muslim community. Today, Islam is the second largest religion in the Netherlands after Christianity. It is estimated that around 5 to 6% of the Dutch population is Muslim, with the largest communities coming from Turkey and Morocco. In addition, there are also Muslims from Suriname, Bosnia, Afghanistan, Somalia, and Indonesia. This growth was followed by the construction of mosques, Islamic cultural centers, and Islamic schools. The first mosque in the Netherlands was established in 1955 in The Hague by the Indonesian community. Now, there are hundreds of mosques in various major cities such as Amsterdam, Rotterdam, and Utrecht. Islam and politics in the Netherlands. The development of Islam also influences the social and political dynamics in the Netherlands. Issues such as integration, national identity, and Islamophobia are often debated in the public, especially after major events such as the September 11, 2001 attacks, the assassination of director Theo van Gogh in 2004, and the increasing social tensions between right-wing groups and the Muslim community. However, on the other hand, many Dutch Muslims are active in politics, education, economics, and other social fields. Several Muslim politicians have been elected to parliament, and young Muslims are increasingly involved in public life with an inclusive and democratic approach. Challenges and future. Although the Muslim community in the Netherlands faces challenges such as stereotypes, discrimination, and difficulties in integration, it has also shown resilience and creativity in responding to changing times. Muslim organizations, Islamic media, educational institutions, and social activities continue to develop as a means of strengthening identity and building dialogue with the wider community. Going forward, Islam in the Netherlands is likely to continue to be an important part of the country's social and cultural landscape. The interaction between Islamic values and Dutch liberal democratic principles will continue to shape the dynamics of Muslim life in the country, creating a new model of diversity and social cohesion in modern Europe.